Oh my goodness. Oh gosh.
Hey, welcome into NFL Kickoff Live. It is the best hour of football talk every single Friday. We'll go around the NFL, talk about every team and every game. And of course, we'll get you local insight that you can't get anywhere else but right here on Locked On. I am your host, Tanitra Batiste, and alongside me are Jarvis Davis and Kyle Krabs. And we'll go right to Thursday night football. I don't really know what to say about that other than it was a typical Thursday night football game. It was the Chicago Bears and the Carolina Panthers. Probably don't need to say much beyond that other than to say somehow the Bears eked out the 16-13 win. And so the battle for the number one pick in the 2024 draft continues. And so that's kind of what I think that's what everybody was really watching, to kind of see who positioned themselves properly for the player / QB they want to get for next year. But you guys, I mean, Kyle, when you took a look at that game, kind of what did you see in the back and forth, dare I say, between Bajent and Young and the Bears and the Panthers, and who was lesser of two evils last night?
Yeah, Chicago rolling out of that game just cackling because they get the win and they have the Panthers first round pick. They keep Carolina at the one win on the season. So they say, oh, okay, nice. We'll double dip. Don't mind us.
Yeah.
I think the Tyson Bagent story is really cool. As a guy who was an undrafted free agent, he played Division II football, goes to the Senior Bowl, is undrafted, gets an opportunity. I think he was the fourth quarterback into camp going for Chicago. And he made some nice throws. You know, he had a really live arm in the pre-draft process when you watched him. And I think it's short week at home on Thursday Night Football is how Chicago ends up winning the game, just because it's such a short turnaround from the previous week.
And somebody had to win it.
Somebody had to win it. Carolina, I thought, really did themselves a disservice at the end of the game with how they approached the 2-minute offense. But that's kind of the thing with this offense with Bryce Young, is between Bryce Young and how he sees the field right now and the performance of the offensive line and the supporting cast that really can't get separation down the field. They're really limited in how they can throw the ball. And I thought you saw that manifest where the best we could scratch out in a 2-minute offense situation with timeouts was a 59-yard field goal.
Yeah, I thought the same. I thought it was poor clock management by their coaching staff. And I thought you're absolutely right. It just showed the guns that Bryce Young doesn't have to be able to get it down the field. And there were moments in time, and don't get me wrong, I understand, KC, that with injuries that have plagued Bryce Young here and there, he may not have wanted to kind of stretch the field, kind of just get that yard that he needed to extend the drive. Token, if you could have gotten even 3 more yards on that particular run, 5 more yards, that thing gives your kicker a 54-yarder versus, say, a 59-yarder. And maybe we're talking about a game that goes into overtime and plays itself out a little bit differently. But Jarvis, what did you see in watching that Thursday night football game?
I don't know about everybody else, but I enjoyed the Deontay Foreman revenge game. Sure, you know. But seriously though, I really think that, and then DJ Moore as well. You know how he got to get down with that. But for me, I thought it's just fascinating to see that. Hey, we're trying to get the number 1 overall pick, and we have to win.
Yes.
Like that, I thought that was just absolutely amazing to be able to see that. It was kind of interesting to see that. So, but I just think that the Bears have just been interesting but non-interesting throughout the entire year, because with the whole drama with Justin Fields and everybody clamoring for Tyson Bagent, just like, all right, okay, cool, let's see what the kid got. Like I said, the storyline is great. As a person who played in Division II football, to see him get the opportunity that he get, I think that is absolutely amazing. Kudos to you, and I hope he continues to take advantage of it. At least show teams that he actually belongs in the NFL. So, but it just what they're going to do with Justin Fields and him could continue to remain out, with an injury, and what they're going to do if he comes back or when he comes back. So it's just, and on the other side of it, with the Carolina Panthers, just watching Bryce Young, just like, who is he throwing the ball to? You got Michael Strahan out here catching balls. I know his name is Strong for all you smart folks, and then you got Adam Thielen out here trying to squeeze whatever he has left in the tank. It's just Mingo, the wide receiver out of Ole Miss, like not really doing anything, not living up to his draft spot. It's just he just doesn't have anything surrounding him worth talking about. In the offensive line, they tried to improve it, but it still can be shaky from time to time. So for me, it's just like I think it's a little unfair for people to kind of have come to the conclusion about Bryce Young and what he's going to be in the NFL going forward. And I just think that just sucks. And then you got a new offense coordinator, Thomas Brown, calling plays as well. So he's already defending some of his play calls and rotations and stuff like that. When you have offensive coordinators being questioned 2 or 3 games in, like that's when you have issues. And it's hard for a young quarterback like Bryce Young to flourish up under that.
Yeah, and as much as I hated to see that with the performance from Bryce Young and what he had to deal with, love to see what the local kid was able to do, because Montez Sweat had himself a game. I didn't necessarily like to see him part ways from the Commanders, because I did think that they had a better upside for him versus the Bears, but Montez Sweat absolutely had himself a game, and maybe more so than anything, putting himself in position maybe to get with a better team come next season. But I think the other piece of watching last night's game was thinking about this rookie class overall, and thinking about CJ Stroud and Bryce Young, Will Levis, Anthony Richardson, of course, like you guys said, Tyson Bagent. And one of the things, that conversation was the key conversation pre-draft, right? Who do you go with? Do you go with Bryce Young? Do you go with CJ Stroud? Which quarterback is indeed the most NFL ready, hit the ground running? Now, granted, let's be honest, the Texans have more guns than the Panthers, right? And they have a better coach on the sidelines already, even though DeMeco Ryans is a first-time head coach. So there's a little bit more there for CJ Stroud to work with, just in terms of his supporting cast and the coaches on the sidelines. But ultimately speaking, CJ Stroud is out there doing big boy things when you look at the rest of this 2024 or 2023 QB class, Kyle, at least from what we've seen from him midway through this season.
Yeah, there's no doubt. And I've been impressed with CJ transitioning from the Ohio State offense, which is a little bit more option routes and a little bit longer developing concepts, versus Bobby Slowick, the offensive coordinator, is off the Shanahan tree. And that's a timing-based offense. And it's a different kind of living that you got to make. And you're seeing CJ Stroud, whether it is the timing stuff or when they have to push the ball down the field to Nico Collins, who's a big-bodied receiver who's athletic and making a lot of big plays and living up to his potential coming out of Michigan a few years back. It's really impressive stuff. And I'll say this about Bryce Young. I always thought Bryce Young was somebody whose style of play at Alabama was going to require a little bit of patience, and it was going to require the right kind of supporting cast around it. And obviously you see the Dolphins logo hanging back here in the background. I know all about that with Alabama quarterbacks and Tua Tagovailoa. I know what it looked like when Brian Flores was trying to run the Chan Gailey passing offense to Mike Gesicki and Devontae Parker and Preston Williams, these 4-6 receivers that can't create any separation. And Bryce, I think, was an even more extreme version of that, because he really liked to get outside of structure at Alabama. Well, you're getting outside of structure here in Carolina, and you're figuring out these NFL defenders, they're half step faster, right? So you can't quite make the same stuff happen. So I'm a little sympathetic to Bryce in the environment that he's in. I agree it's way too early, but I always thought that was the one that was going to have to take some time if it wasn't in an ideal situation, where CJ Stroud, I thought his translatability of the style of play that he had at Alabama was a little bit more 1-for-1.
Yeah, agreed. And you look at what Will Levis has been able to do as well. And, he has the good fortune of having a guy like Derrick Henry, so that there's even a little opportunity for them to bring him along. And don't get me wrong, in his debut, as Jarvis had to see up close and personal covering the Falcons, what a debut that was for Will Levis. But ultimately speaking, he's got some pieces around him as well that have allowed him to flourish very early on in his rookie season.
For sure. When you think about guys like veterans, guys like DeAndre Hopkins, be able to throw the football to him and turn around and hand the ball off to a guy like a Derrick Henry, and a guy who's an emerging running back who I feel like should be getting more touches than Tyjae Spears. So those are the type of things that you feel like that's when you start putting together an offense. Like when you have different style backs that you can get the ball to, turn around and hand off to, and throw to. And then you got a veteran wide receiver who knows how to get open, in certain instances. So I think that when you're surrounded, and Mike Vrabel, hate it or love him, he's a good coach. He's a good head coach. I like what Mike Vrabel brings to the table. He brings stability. I feel like when it comes to what you need to do on a weekly basis as a head coach in the NFL. So I think that. But on the other side of that, when you talk about C.J. Stroud, he has no running game, whatsoever.
Yeah,
none, not even a threat of a running game, and he's out there winning football games. 46 seconds left, 2 timeouts, and you come down here and you throwing absolute darts. Like, I remember being so fascinated when Ohio State played against the Georgia Bulldogs, and I was just like, oh my! I knew C.J. Stroud was good, but to see him do it against that defense, who put in like 50 doggone first round draft picks within the past 2 years, seemingly. So to be able to see him not only do that against a team like the Georgia Bulldogs, but come into the NFL, it's a different beast, right? Like Kyle mentioned, like guys are a step and a half or 2 or 3 steps quicker or faster than in college. So when you see him coming in with no threat of a running game and just being able to will his team to win, and he's out there just throwing, the ball just pops out of his doggone hand. Just the way he's just throwing the ball downfield and connecting with his wide receivers. Now, granted, those guys are talented, but he's making them look good as well. So that's a mutual relationship going on down there in Houston. So this class is going to be very interesting going forward. But it seems like C.J. Stroud is the guy that's kind of leading the pack as of right now.
Yeah, and interesting is a good word to use, JD, because honestly, Kyle, a lot of them have had to spring into action so much faster than we thought. You're looking at Sunday. I think this Sunday coming, you'll have 10 rookie QBs who are going to start out of 32 teams. That's crazy to think. I don't think anybody thought at the beginning of the season that a third of the league would be starting guys that they just drafted 6 months ago. So I think that also makes it interesting because you're now seeing those guys who are really ready and also the guys who have the pieces around them to help them to be a little bit more game ready versus say the guys who either aren't game ready or maybe are work in progress. Obviously, Anthony Richardson is still a question mark just because of the injury. But ultimately speaking, I think it's a matter of, wow, they've had to spring into action. And now you can really see either what some of those flaws are, which ones might need a little bit of extra time, or which ones are going to need some serious help in the offseason, in free agency, or in the draft class if you ever want them to show the potential that they really have.
Yeah, and some of these are in kind of tough spots too. Where I think about Aiden O'Connell with the Raiders, who head coach fired already, didn't make it to halfway point of the season. They played Monday Night Football and got shellacked, and McDaniels is let go, and they go to O'Connell and they turn to him, and now that he's in an evaluation window with a team that really struggled and didn't just fire Josh McDaniels, they fired the offensive coordinator too. Now they came out and they beat the Giants, but you usually do see kind of a bump. The fired coach bump is a real thing. Right. The game or the 2 games immediately afterwards.
Especially if he wasn't well liked.
Yes.
Right.
Lightly.
So for Aiden O'Connell, it's tough because you're a rookie quarterback whose coach has been fired. The GM's been fired. You just got brought in. There's going to be a new brain trust next year. So you're playing for not only just the Raiders to evaluate you, you're playing for a lot of teams to potentially evaluate you, because what happens if a new GM does come in and by the end of year 2 or year 3, they say, I didn't pick this guy. He's not my guy. Right. We want to run a different style of offense. So there's some really good opportunities. I think Tyson Bagent's another great example of that, who doesn't have a long-term commitment. He's a UDFA, but the tape that he's putting out is going to get him a lot of opportunities to extend his NFL career, whether it's as a starter or a backup. And, I think it's great for kind of the youth infusions for some of the quarterbacks in the game. You kind of have seen over the last 5 years or so this exodus of all of the faces at the quarterback position from the previous generation. The Breeze, the Manning, the Brady, all those guys are now out. So getting some young guys in here and some opportunities to see who can really strike and take advantage of it. It's one of the really fun storylines in the back half of the season.
Yeah, I think it's a fun storyline for the rookie class, but also an interesting and intriguing storyline, if you will, for the sophomore class, because you look at the likes of a Kenny Pickett or Desmond Ridder, and you say to yourself, what's going to happen and how will things play out for that class as well. Now, it's almost time for us to talk about our game of the week. Of course, that's between the Texans and Bengals. But before we get there, we have a quick word from Jarvis about Prize Picks.
Guys, with basketball season right here, first of all, let me say this. This episode of NFL Kickoff Live is brought to you by Prize Picks. And now you can pick combo projections across football and basketball from the Specials League, a league created specifically for combo projections that includes 2 or more players from different sports or leagues. For example, you want to get the Kane, LeBron James, plus a Travis Kelce and a 10.5 combo of 3 points made plus receptions, you can do that. And you also can want players alongside some of the Prize Picks favorite players like rapper Meek Mill and comedian Andrew Schultz. You can now find community plays on the promo tab of the app to view entries from some of the biggest names in the Prize Pick community each week, guys. And plus, if an injury happens, guess what they do? They even offer a reboot policy so that your entries stay in play even if one of your players get injured. For football and basketball games, if you have a player who exits the game in the first half and does not return in the second, that player is rebooted. Prize Picks is the only daily fantasy sports platform with an insurance policy. I'm telling you guys, injury insurance policies. So make sure you check out prizepicks.com/lockedonnfl. That's prizepicks.com/lockedonnfl because this is daily fantasy sports made easy.
All right, guys, we talked about the Rookie of the Year candidate in C.J. Stroud. Of course, his Houston Texans will be facing off against another guy that was looking all world as a rookie in Joe Burrow. The Bengals, a team that's now on fire. So how do Cody Davis of Locked On Texans and James Rapine of Locked On Bengals see this game shaking out? Well, let's take a listen.
I think it's important for this defense to get off to a fast start against C.J. Stroud and Tank Dell and Nico Collins and to just let this offense know that they're not going to pick up where they left off against Tampa Bay, where they were just firing on all cylinders and really, really hot. I think that's important for the Bengals because if a young team gets some confidence early in the game on the road and that fire's going, it's tough to put it out sometimes, even though this defense has been really good and has rebounded after giving up opening touchdowns to the Bills and the Seahawks, just naming a few recent games for the Bengals that they ended up winning and the defense rebounded. But you don't want to have to rebound this week. I think you want to get off to a quick start on defense, take control that way and not let C.J. Stroud get into a rhythm, certainly not let their ground attack get going at all. You mentioned the struggles on the ground. If you can do that, I like their chances at home. And I'm going to pick the Bengals. I don't know prediction-wise exactly what I'll do score-wise. I can do that on Thursday's episode of Locked On Bengals, but I'll pick the Bengals in this one. I do think that it could be a more competitive game than most thought when the schedule came out and they were playing the schedule game. I'm excited to watch it for sure. And so the storylines, it's a bigger game. I could see the Texans winning. I'm not going to dismiss that, but I know I'll take the Bengals in this one.
I could see the Texans winning too, but once again, my concerns for these injuries at key positions, I think at some point it might hamper their ability to win against one of the best teams in the AFC, one of the best teams in the league, if you're being honest. And, I'm looking at Cincinnati from afar every single week. It seems like you guys are, gaining that momentum, that steam of getting back to the level that you guys were last year. And I look at the Texans, I'm like, I think this game can definitely be a measuring stick in terms of to see how realistic the quote unquote playoff run we're all hoping that we get here in the city of Houston. But I just think maybe more so in the second half, the absences to a lot of these guys might turn in favor of Cincinnati. And James, as you mentioned, and for what I saw against the Bills, Joe Burrow is starting to get it going. Not saying CJ can't match him toe for toe, but I just think that this one might go in favor of Cincinnati.
Yeah, I think that's the fun part is they have a good relationship. I know Burrow gave CJ some advice earlier in the year, or at least coming into the season.
Mm-hmm.
And so, CJ's going to be excited for this one, going toe-to-toe with Burrow. A few years ago, Burrow was in the same position going up against different guys in the league. So that part will certainly be fun. I'm excited about this matchup.
All right, guys. So it's interesting because as I'm looking at this, I'm thinking to myself, the question that I have to ask hurts my soul, because after the Bengals started 1-3, now they won 4 straight, which means that over in the AFC North, they are tied with my Steelers, they are tied with the Browns, and of course the Ravens are atop the division. But Jarvis, do you feel like with this 4-game run for the Bengals that Cincinnati's back?
Absolutely.
Boo, but okay.
Absolutely. Joe Cool has completed 76% of his passes in the last 4 games. Absolute ridiculous. 10 touchdowns, over 1,100 yards, only 2 picks. Yeah, this man is absolutely back, and I think this is going to be an intriguing matchup. I think I might have a little bit more confidence than Cody did as far as this team, because I think this can be a matchup that might play into what both teams want to do, and that's pass the football, because Dameon Pierce is going to be out, Nico Collins is going to be out, but on the other side, Cincinnati had T. Higgins is going to be out as well. So, and one of Cincinnati's best pass rushers, Sam Hubbard's going to be out as well. So when you have those dynamics, those guys at those particular positions being out, it kind of evens out things, I feel like a little bit. But I think that, this can turn into a nice little track meet. Now, granted, if it does, I'm all into what Joe can be able to do in a game like this, but I wouldn't count CJ Stroud out the way he's been playing.
Yeah, and Casey, that's an interesting point that Jarvis makes. It could potentially become a track meet. So if it does, who does that track meet favor down the stretch?
I think the team that has had the players that have been there and done that and have more experience in these spots is where I would probably lean with Cincinnati. It's a home game for Cincinnati as well. That's a really tough environment to go in and execute, not make mistakes. And for all the talk about this Cincinnati offense, the Bengals defense has forced 10 turnovers in the last 4 games. And that has really helped. If you look beyond the first game of the season when Joe Burrow came back and they had 67 passing yards, but still had 2 turnovers, like by and large, this has been a team that largely when they win the turnover battle, they're taking care of business and winning football games. And the defense has really ramped that up. So I think Houston's going to move the ball. The question is, can you avoid those 3 or 4 plays and mistakes that can so easily turn what could be a 31-point output to a 17 or 20-point output and give the other team a short field on a couple of occasions? And I think that's the concern for a young quarterback going into a tough environment like this, especially because, listen, he's going back to Cincinnati, right? Like that's right on the doorstep of Columbus. He's going to be juiced to go back there and play for sure. Yeah. And I just think there's a lot of the inexperience element versus Cincinnati that I just don't really like for Houston in this game.
Yeah, and it could turn on a dime with something like exactly where is Jamar Chase in terms of his health and whether or not he's going to be that game time decision and whether or not he's going to be good enough to go. But I also like something that you just pointed out, Kyle. Jarvis, we don't often talk about the Bengals and their defense, right? And understandably so, because the Bengals have had a prolific offense for the past couple seasons, and we're starting to see that prolific offense return in a major way, thanks to Joe Burrow being back to his Joe Burrow self, doing Joe Burrow things. But yeah, that defense could also be critical. And where my mind goes is back to the track meet. If we're looking at something that's 38-35 or something in the high 20s, it may come down to that one defensive stop at the end that makes that decision or decides that game for the Bengals, in favor of the Bengals. And maybe it is because we're having this conversation because it is about the defense and not necessarily what the offense does.
Yeah, I think that when you think about what the job that Lou Anarumo has done, we see like the type of guys that he is able to, how he's able to coach those guys up, and not only coach guys up, but because a lot of times when people use that term, people think that, oh, the guy's not that talented. No, they've had some talent. Like we've seen that down here in Atlanta with what Jesse Bates was able to do his first few games. You see the experience and the knack that he has for the ball like that. I mean, yes, sure, that's natural. Some of that's natural, but yeah, you could tell he's been well coached also. So I think that's what Lou Anarumo brings to the table, just from a coaching experience and being and working with these guys and being there for quite some time. You know, it's no secret that, you know, this guy was being bandied around and maybe potentially being a head coach. So when you have that type of Midas touch, so to speak, in that locker room, yeah, like I can see them this game coming down to play being made by whichever defense, and I can see Cincinnati definitely coming through with that.
Now, Kyle, this is a critical game. Not that it's not critical for the Bengals as they continue to kind of catch up to the Baltimore Ravens in the division, but also for your Houston Texans because they're at 4-4, and of course they're chasing the Jacksonville Jaguars at 6-2. But most importantly, they're probably chasing a wild card spot. What do we need to see out of the Texans in order for them to move to 5-4?
Yeah, I think their margin for error is pretty slim. That they're going to have to get more balance going offensively than what they have had. I think if you are one-dimensional against Lou Anarumo with the exotic coverages that he presents and how he changes the picture and he will pressure you and they're very aggressive, that's not a recipe that you particularly love against a rookie quarterback. So I think you're going to have an uncharacteristic game up front. And when you're trying to block guys like what the Bengals have on the interior with DJ Reader and the physicality of the line and the speed of the linebackers, it just doesn't feel like the mix that's going to happen. But I will say this, I think you make a great point, Teenager, about the wild card component at 4-4. It's all going to be on the table with whatever happens, right? Because you have Arizona at home, then you have Jacksonville at home, and you already beat Jacksonville by 20 points earlier this season.
Yeah.
You get the Denver Broncos, your next 3 games after that, and you have 3 more divisional games between the Titans and Colts. So you're going to have opportunities if you're Houston to make a play to push for double-digit wins, regardless of whatever the game is or the result of the game is against Cincinnati. I think this is a bigger game for Cincinnati to take care of business because they do have divisional expectations. They do have aspirations to climb all the way out of this thing and be the 1 seed because they play all these teams in front of them in the standings. They just beat the Bills. They got the Chiefs in week 17, I believe, later this year. They got the Baltimore matchup coming up. So Cincinnati, you know, they have a chance to climb all the way back out of this hole, but you can't drop a game like this if you're going to do it.
And I think that's a great call too, Kyle, because this is, if I'm correct, the only division in the entirety of the NFL with all 4 teams having a winning record. 3 out of the 4 teams, 5-3. And of course, I think Baltimore's 6-2. So when you look at that overall, the competition is fierce and, you know, it'll be tough enough to get out of your division. It's probably, you know, similar to Jarvis, how it is here for the Falcons and what's going on in the NFC South, where you're pretty much, if you want to get into the playoffs, you just got to win the division. That's probably your best route. And that might be the case for the Bengals and really the entirety of the AFC North.
Yeah, this is one that's going to be tough because I really feel like the Baltimore Ravens are the most balanced team.
Yes.
Now the Chiefs, best team. Yeah, we can have some conversations about that. But as far as just the most balanced team, I feel like the Ravens are that team right now because coming to the season, I really felt like Lamar Jackson had everything was kind of lining up for him to have an MVP type season. Now got off to a little bit of a slow start. Now Todd Monken is starting to find the flow with this offense, and I think that he's a type of guy that had the reputation in his previous stint in the NFL of being pass happy. Came down to Georgia, and hey man, we got some really good tight ends, and we like to run the football. Okay, let's run some 12 personnel and get this offense cooking. Now being able to make those necessary adjustments. Get a couple, get some national championships under your belt, and then now you move into the NFL trying to do the same thing. You got this exceptional talent at the quarterback spot that you can use his legs, and he has an arm as well, can sit in the pocket and make throws also. And you're just getting him acclimated to not necessarily installing your offense, but how does your offense fit what he can do and what he can do best. And I think that's what we're starting to see a product of that now. So this AFC North division is going to be very tight as we go down to the second half of the season.
Oh, yeah, definitely down to the wire. Now, as we prepare you for this NFL week with Sell Me Why, here's Jarvis to prepare you guys on how you can have better health with Jace Medical.
Guys, this episode of the NFL Kickoff Live Show is brought to you by Jace Medical. Go to jacemedical.com right now. jacemedical.com, JASEMEDICAL.com. What is Jace Case, Jarvis? Jace Case provides 5 life-saving antibiotics for emergency use because I'm the type of person where I don't want to get caught off guard when it comes to my babies. You know, they in the middle of the night, they're sick and they're sneezing, and they're trying to figure out what's going on with them. I'm telling you, Jace Case got everything right there just for you. I'm talking about life-saving antibiotics. All you got to do is get a Jace Case. To get a Jace Case is to fill out a simple online form, and in some cases, jump on a quick call with one of our board-certified physicians. No flugaziness, none of that stuff. These people are real doctors. Get on ongoing care from our physicians on any treatment-related questions. So if you got questions about this particular antibiotic, what it does, what is it supposed to do, all you got to do is give us a call right now. Doctor created, doctor recommended. And plus, guys, if you go to jacemedical.com, all you got to do is drop a promo code in, locked on. That's LOCKEDON, and you're going to get $20 off. So that's jacemedical.com. Put in the promo code locked on, and you're going to get $20 off your purchase. Make sure you guys don't get caught off guard.
Tanitra, your mic.
Hey, I did one of those things that people do on Zoom, like the old people.
I did it last week.
I know, right? Did it like my mom. I was so making sure that I didn't talk. I'm like, no, now you want to talk. But anywho, what I was telling you guys, and thank you for catching that, KC, is as much as I hate to give the Baltimore Ravens all the credit in the world, I definitely also want to check that and make sure we know that they are 7-2 because they've actually played 9 games through the season and are truly, truly sitting atop that AFC North, which means it's going to be such an intriguing battle this coming weekend between the Baltimore Ravens and the Cleveland Browns in the AFC North. Browns are 6.5-point underdogs to the Ravens. And here's Jeff Lloyd of Locked On Browns to sell you why the Browns will cover that spread.
Hey, Cleveland Browns fans, Jeff Lloyd from the Locked On Browns podcast, giving you 3 reasons why the Cleveland Browns at worst should be able to cover the spread Sunday in Baltimore against the Ravens. As we all know, the first matchup between the Ravens and the Browns, Deshaun Watson missed the game. Deshaun Watson's last 2 complete starts for the Browns, he has been extremely accurate. He has been turnover-free, being able to extend drives. Even if they don't get touchdowns, they've been getting them down closer to at least get into field goal range. The Ravens, although they have some players in this game that they did not have the first time around, Deshaun Watson is supposed to be the franchise quarterback for the Cleveland Browns, and he is a guy that's supposed to be a difference maker in big games like this. The defensive side of the ball, the defense has been playing lights out to this point, and now you're starting to see the depth of the Cleveland Browns defensive line, and they did a pretty solid job of holding the Baltimore Ravens running game to at least a standstill the first time. The Ravens only averaged 4 yards per carry. Granted, some of that was on some bigger runs from Justice Hill, the main back, Gus Edwards. The Browns were able to control that day. Lamar Jackson, they were even able to keep him within limitations as far as what Lamar can do with his legs. The Browns defense is only getting better, so you figure that this will still play in a second time against the Ravens, even though this game is in Baltimore. The Browns offense, Browns defense, and this is the key to having Watson back here, is understanding what the Browns have in Dustin Hopkins. Dustin Hopkins, to this point, is actually having a better season than longtime Ravens standout kicker Justin Tucker. If they can keep the drives going and they can at least get in the field goal range, Hopkins has been pretty much automatic to this season, allowing for the Browns to keep this game close in score. Even drives where the Browns aren't successful, Barack West has been a fantastic punter this year as far as flipping the field and getting the Browns defense into positions where offenses are starting maybe inside their own 20 or even inside their own 10. These are 3 reasons why I think the Browns should be able to hang with the Baltimore Ravens and cover the spread on Sunday in Baltimore.
All right, guys. Are you sold, Kyle, that the Browns will actually cover this spread? They, of course, are 6.5-point underdogs.
See, now I did it. This one's tough. I got your back. This one's tough. This Ravens defense is so stout. They are astronomically good as far as creating turnovers, as far as what they're able to do in the run game. They are only allowing 4.0 yards per carry. They are allowing 4.1 net yards per attempt. So teams are getting about the same amount of yardage trying to pass the ball against this defense as they are trying to run the ball against this defense, which is opportunistic in getting turnovers, whether it's Jadeveon Clowney or Kyle Van Noy, who they picked up off the street mid-season. This pass rush group for Mike McDonald, the defensive coordinator, is killing it. So I love Cleveland's defense. But if I look at Baltimore's offense versus Cleveland's defense, I think Baltimore's offense spreads the ball around a little bit more effectively. They have more guys that can contribute at a high level versus the Browns defense or the Browns offense against the Ravens defense. You have Nick Chubb, who's out. You have both offensive tackles who are out. That is a bad mix to stay balanced offensively and to buy Deshaun Watson the kind of time that he's going to need to have success. So I'm probably fading the Browns to cover the 6.5.
Yeah. And Jarvis, that's something that we've talked about in the past. Just Zay Flowers is just unbelievable with what he's able to do. Odell Beckham Jr. is still solid. And of course, the Ravens low key have always had a nice tight end room, right? Mm-hmm. And so having someone like Todd Monken, who, as you mentioned earlier, he can work some 12, if not some 13 personnel. You've really got some good pieces for him to work. And of course, that O-line, who has been maligned, just like the Steelers, of course, the last couple seasons with injury, they're looking really good now. So yeah, you've got a Ravens offense that, to Kyle's point, that defense is stellar, but man, they've now got the complementary pieces on the offense to match what they've gotten from the defense the last couple seasons.
Yeah, and it's kind of refreshing to see, right? Because like the knock on Lamar Jackson, which has just been so weird when it comes to from an evaluation standpoint. People didn't think he can run a pro style offense, but he ran Bobby Petrino, for those who don't know, Bobby Petrino's offense at Louisville, and he ran it to the T. And it was just a matter of him making sure he didn't take unnecessary hits. You know, of course, the whole the stability questions came in, so that was understandable. But for him to be able to come into this season with an OC that, hey, I trust you to run the football. I mean, be able to throw the football from the pocket. I know what you are capable of doing, and I'm also going to use your that skill set, right? That you have to take advantage of, and it's just a matter of making sure when to tap into that, you know, at what particular point of the game. So because when you understand when to use those things, like, you can just really just mess up a defense. Now, granted, Cleveland Browns just coming off giving the Arizona Cardinals a goose egg. So this is a really, really good defense. So Myles Garrett is playing on an MVP type level. I ain't talking about defensive player of the year. I'm talking about league MVP. Like, I put defensive lineman up in that category. I know people always want to just talk about quarterbacks, but I put him in those type of conversations, because that's the type of difference maker that he is on for that team as a whole, not just the defense. So for me, I really feel like this is another opportunity for Lamar to put his stamp on this MVP candidacy. Yeah. And I think I wholeheartedly believe that he's going to do that. But on the other side, though, Cleveland, you got Deshaun Watson, like Jeff pointed out. Yeah, he's had some pretty clean games. But when you talk about missing 3 of your top offensive tackles against the sack leading defense in the NFL with 35, they got 35 sacks almost at the halfway mark, a little bit over the halfway mark. Yeah, that's going to be a hard task, T. I'm not saying that the Ravens are going to goose egg these guys, but it is setting up for this Ravens defense to continue to do what they do, and that's dominate opposing offenses.
Indeed. What a difference a year makes, because, this is a well-rounded team where a year ago we didn't even know if Lamar Jackson was going to be suited up in a Ravens uniform. And now here we are now. Kyler Murray, speaking of a guy that returns for a different reason, of course, but he's returning from injury. We got the official word earlier today that he will get the start Sunday against the Falcons. The Cardinals are 1.5-point underdogs to the Falcons. But that line has been moving now that we've gotten that word about Murray. And it's been moving in favor of the Cardinals. Here's Alex Clancy of Locked On Cardinals to tell you why the Cardinals will cover that spread.
Why will the Arizona Cardinals cover the 1.5-point spread on Sunday at home against the Atlanta Falcons? I'm glad you asked. I'm Alex Clancy with Locked On Cardinals. There is one name, and I think you know who it is, coming back off the PUP list after tearing his ACL from last year. Number one in your hearts, number one on his jersey, and it's Kyler Murray. All joking aside, Kyler Murray coming back and now being able to implement Drew Petzing's offense could be a recipe for a great offense for the Arizona Cardinals for years to come. Kyler Murray elevates everybody on the offensive side of the ball, and regardless how lesser than talent-wise the defense is, the offense needs to take charge, and I'm pretty sure they will against the so-so defense of the Atlanta Falcons on Sunday. Not to mention James Conner coming back off the IR. So the Cardinals have their 1-2 punch in the backfield with the run-first offense that Drew Petzing has implemented, an offense that's kept the Arizona Cardinals in games for the majority of the 2023 season with Joshua Dobbs at quarterback. So 1.5-point spread from our fans at FanDuel, I think, is giving Kyler Murray the credit he deserves, because this line was a lot wider than where it currently sits. So why will the Cardinals cover the spread? Kyler Murray makes Hollywood Brown better. He makes Michael Wilson better. He makes Trey McBride better. He makes James Conner better. He makes the offensive line's job not as difficult as it's been through the first 9 weeks. And again, while the defense isn't what it needs to be in an effort to compete from a defensive standpoint, the power and talent that Kyler Murray brings is the main reason why the Cardinals will cover the 1.5-point spread on Sunday against.
All right, guys, I am going to be nice to Jarvis, and I'm going to throw this one to Kyle and ask whether or not the Cardinals are going to cover the spread, and if so, tell us why.
I think they have a decent chance, just because I do not like what the Atlanta Falcons are doing right now. And
you and everybody
join the club.
Right.
No. And Arthur Smith getting all sassy about it in the press conferences all week long. I'm like, buddy, you got Tyler Algier 13th in the league in carries, and he's averaging 3.2 yards per carry. Maybe we should calm down on the salt here with the questions about your top 10 pick running back and his workload. Yeah. Never mind Jonnu Smith outperforming Kyle Pitts and the whole 9 yards. So I think Kyler Murray is a really fun kind of change up to throw at this game. The Cardinals to this point in the season have been very scrappy. They have put up a really good fight against some good football teams. They beat the Dallas Cowboys. I think Kyler, if he's every bit of what he was as an athlete coming back off of a knee injury, his mobility can kind of create some chaos. I don't think that I like a returning quarterback this late in the season to win his first start, though. I just think it's too much to try to jumpstart and get back into the swing of things after having missed a lot of time. I know he's practiced the last few weeks to gear up. I'll probably take Atlanta, and because the spread is so close, I'll take Atlanta to cover. But this would not be a game that I would be surprised to find out that the Cardinals did win and they are able to cover the spread.
God help Falcons Nation, Jarvis, if that is indeed the case. But you do have a point, Kyle, because whether it was an actual rookie or whether it was a quarterback starting his first game of the season for a team 3 days after he landed in that city, the Falcons have been on the struggle bus with quarterbacks who just pop up and say, hey, I'm ready to get my first start of the season. So, Jarvis, how's it going to go down in Arizona in the Desert of the Sun this weekend? Valley of the Sun.
I'm going to give you the most intellectual answer that I could possibly give you. I have no idea. Here's why. Because, like, when you think about this Falcons team, like, they went into the whole going young on offense. You draft Bijan Robinson, pass up on Jalen Carter, by the way. I'm going to take every
He's going to say that
opportunity
every
every time. Because here's the thing. I feel like if you're in a situation where you're defending your play calling, schemes, looks, decoys, and all that stuff, and you take a guy like that, a running back in the top 10, I feel like you never really had a plan for him, because in the beginning of the year, we saw flashes. Right now, we barely see it. And then when he does get an opportunity to carry the football, he's fumbling the ball. So what is really going on with this offense? Because at the end of the day, I know I advocated for Tyler Algier to get some carries, but at the end of the day, it's all about production. Kyle just pointed it out. 3.2 yards a carry. Oh, now let's go use our top 10 running back that we drafted. Oh, let's go, make sure we get our number one wide receiver that you drafted, who has been productive when he's been on the field.
Right.
Let's get him back into the game and get him involved. Oh yeah, the tight end the highest drafted tight end in NFL history. Yeah, let's figure out a way to get him involved. Let's figure out a way to get him downfield and not have him blocking Danielle Hunter for the tight end 2 to run a jet sweep on the goal line, on the 1 yard line. So yeah, it's really difficult to put a finger on this team, because we're so deep into it. You know how it is. We cover this team day in and day out, and Arthur Smith is changing. I'm starting to see some changes, right? Like, he's no longer getting sassy, Kyle. He's actually answering questions and explaining himself. And what did I mention earlier? When you have offensive coordinators explaining themselves, explaining what they were thinking in press conferences, that can never lead to a good thing. That's never a good thing. And when that person is also the head coach, and people are asking whether or not he's going to give up play calling duties, that's when you know there's an issue. So yeah, this is a game where they should win. It's a tough call because of just what's been going on these past couple of weeks.
Indeed.
But they should win. And I wouldn't be surprised if they do. But dog it, I would not be surprised if Arizona mess around and covers this spread.
Yeah, speaking of a guy that has some explaining to do, Matt Canada always has explaining to do every single week. So speaking of that OC that makes you scratch your head, Pittsburgh Steelers are playing host to the Green Bay Packers this weekend. They're 3-point favorites, and Chris Carter of Locked On Steelers is going to tell us why the Steelers will cover their spread.
I'm Chris Carter of the Locked On Steelers podcast, and the Steelers are favored 3 points by FanDuel Sportsbook in their matchup with the Green Bay Packers at Acrisure Stadium to kick off 1 p.m. Eastern Time Sunday. Now, why can the Steelers cover that? I think there's a few reasons that you have to point to if you look at how these two teams play and how the matchup favors the Steelers to exceed that 3-point number there. Now, one thing that I look at is with Jordan Love is how he's been throwing interceptions. Right now, the Packers are averaging throwing an interception in every game they've played, 8 on the year, one per game in that process. That's in the bottom 10 of the league right now. But on the flip side, the Steelers defense ranks in the top 10 in forcing interceptions this year, also averaging an interception for every game that they've played so far. That's where I see this game maybe taking a turn in the favor of the Steelers. The Steelers defense is known for getting after quarterbacks, creating pressure, even when they're not exactly hitting the quarterback or recording a sack. They've been known to change the pocket up and force the quarterback to be uncomfortable. And if you can force Jordan Love to be uncomfortable, have to make throws outside of the pocket, on the move, or out of rhythm, that's where you can get more of those mistakes, especially if the Steelers are able to get some things going on offense. Their offense hasn't been good this year, but they've been starting to get things click. The emergence of rookie Broderick Jones, who looks like he's going to start at right tackle in this game, has given the run game a boost. And that's where the Steelers can hurt the Packers. If their run game gets going and they can get some points early, I can see Jordan Love being the guy who throws a couple interceptions in this game that proves costly. And Kenny Pickett, known for his fourth quarter heroics, won't have to be a fourth quarter hero. He'll just have to make sure that the Steelers manage and lead their way to victory. I have the Steelers winning 24-20 in this game, which should get you that 3-point cover.
Kyle, I'll ask you to take us to break with a quick one. Will the Steelers cover the spread?
I think so. I think Green Bay, he mentioned Jordan Love and the turnovers that he struggled with, and then the running game for Green Bay, it's shown a little bit of signs of life, 2 of the last 3 weeks, but at the end of the day, that offensive line is hurting without Bakhtiari, and the Steelers last week got Cam Hayward back. And that exchange in personnel is not a combination that I like for Green Bay to maintain their recent success running the ball.
Yeah, anytime Chris Carter's first cousin is back in the lineup, everything is good with the Pittsburgh Steelers. Now, being an NFL fan, depending on which team you root for, it can be stressful, but Jarvis can tell you how BetterHelp can help you manage that stress.
Jarvis Davis here for BetterHelp. This episode of the NFL Kickoff Live Show is brought to you by BetterHelp. Now, I was just having a conversation with my wife just the other day about buying gifts and trying to figure out how many gifts we're going to get the girls for this year and all that stuff. And you know what? That could be super, super stressful, especially when money may be a little bit tight. But guess what? I got a suggestion for you. How about you try BetterHelp? This is something new to your life that can be very positive, and it can help you with those feelings of anxiety or just stress overall. So one of the things that about BetterHelp that is you can be going through some things in your life, and you're looking and have something to look forward to, that make you feel like you're grounded and give you the tools to be able to manage like through these holiday seasons. So you won't be stressed out about whether or not you're going to buy or how many gifts you're going to buy your loved ones. You don't have to feel that way. I promise you. So if you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. I promise you'll never regret it, because that's what I've been thinking about. I've been thinking about, okay, maybe I should see a therapist. Like, why am I having this thought? Or why am I constantly always focusing on the negative thing that's going on in my life? So no, you need to go try BetterHelp. It's entirely online. It's designed to be convenient, flexible, and it's suited to your schedule. All you got to do is just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched up with a licensed therapist. And you can switch therapists. If you don't like that one, you can switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. So find your bright spot in this holiday season with BetterHelp.
Always good to get some help with your health. Now, this week brings some interesting matchups across the NFL, which fantasy players will find themselves in bad matchups this week. Well, Michelle Majuk from Locked On Fantasy Football has the answer.
There are three players that I'm fading heavily in fantasy due to their Week 10 matchup. First up, it's Texans rookie quarterback sensation CJ Stroud against the Cincinnati Bengals. I know, hang in with me. I know it's hard to sit him after what he did last week, but it's important to remember that Stroud, prior to last week, he wasn't doing much for fantasy, right? There was 3 straight games scoring under 15 fantasy points per game. And Stroud has also only averaged 14.6 fantasy points per game on the road this season. Plus, playing in Cincinnati is never easy for any quarterback, let alone a rookie quarterback on the road. The Bengals defense overall this year have allowed just 9 passing touchdowns all season, while coming down with 11 interceptions. They have yet to allow an opponent to throw more than 2 passing touchdowns against them this year. I do not think this is going to be a very good game for CJ Stroud this week, and I want to keep him on my bench if I can. Next up is Cleveland Browns running back Kareem Hunt. He has to face the Baltimore Ravens this week. Kareem Hunt has been very, very valuable for fantasy. He has, because he gets into the end zone every week. He's scored a touchdown in each of the last 4 games. But I don't envision there being very many scoring opportunities for the Cleveland Browns in this matchup against the Ravens, who are the number 1 defense in the NFL this year in points per game allowed. So without a touchdown, Hunt is going to be a very disappointing fantasy play. Maybe he squeaks one in, but I am very hesitant on playing Hunt this week against the Baltimore Ravens. And then last up is Raiders wide receiver Davante Adams. Unfortunately, he just hasn't been doing too much, stuck on this terrible offense. He's not hit 60 receiving yards in a game since week 4, hasn't caught a touchdown since week 3, and he's playing with Aiden O'Connell. And last week with Aiden O'Connell, Davante Adams was basically a ghost. Now he has to unfortunately face the New York Jets. Like, that's the worst way that this can go in week 10. The Jets are allowing by far the the fewest fantasy points per game to wide receivers this year. It's not going to be an easy matchup for him whatsoever. And again, he's just not getting the target share that he needs to get or getting that efficiency and those good targets. So I know it's never easy to sit a guy as talented as Devontae Adams, but I'm really, really expecting a very disappointing week from him on Sunday Night Football.
Hey guys, I trust Majuk, so I feel like I'm going to win in fantasy football this week some way, somehow. But here's the interesting thing and the intriguing thing about Vikings versus Saints. It's going to be a toss-up for them because both of those teams, I feel like, kind of go up and down. Obviously, the Saints have taken over atop the NFC South with their win this past weekend against the Bears. The Vikings are right there because the Detroit Lions, while still a good team, still solid, they have definitely shown that they have some chinks in the armor. So this could be an opportunity for the Vikings. The intriguing thing, Jarvis, is where Justin Jefferson kind of falls right now. He is still listed as questionable as in the last 20 minutes. That was most recent update. By the way, TJ Hawkinson is actually listed as questionable as well at tight end. So it should be intriguing to see how that kind of plays into things. But how do you feel this helps the Vikings team that is really fighting and clawing to kind of keep themselves in, I'll say not so much the playoff hunt. I'll break it down even further to say the wild card hunt.
Yeah. When you think about what they were able to do last week against the Atlanta Falcons, like that's unheard of. And Kevin O'Connell even reiterated as much and saying about like that's the best performance I've ever, basically I've ever seen. And when you think about the gravity of that, like Josh Dobbs didn't even know hardly none of his teammates' names. Like, yeah, I'll get to that a little bit later. And they were literally working on the snap count, signal calling, and then in his ear, hey, this is what you need to be looking for on this particular play, and like literally translating plays, language, during the game as they walking up to the line of scrimmage. That's just type of stuff that's just unheard of.
Yeah.
And for them to be able to get a win like that, you get a little mojo behind yourself. You start feeling better about yourself because that team was pretty much left for dead. And then, they start to win a couple games, and then you get a big win last week. You kind of couple that with like, hey, okay, we're still in it. We still have a chance. Like you said, not necessarily to get up in the division, but like, hey, this wild card thing might be a real thing. That might be something that we can continue to strive for. So I think that when you potentially can get a guy like Justin Jefferson back into the fold, like this is the best wide receiver in the NFL. So like, I don't care who's that quarterback. Yeah. If he comes back and he's eligible to play, like that's gonna be a big boost for the guys in purple and gold.
Yeah, and it's very interesting that you mentioned that because the Saints are kind of that team as well where I don't know if I won't say left for dead. I'll call them left for life support because I'm not really sure. We didn't really know what to make of them, quite honestly, with right. Derek Carr coming in, didn't kind of know what he was going to bring to the table and a lot of up and downs. But honestly, Kyle, I kind of use this term. I call them a little scrappy. I think their secondary is kind of like a little scrappy. They show up. And, of course, Demario Davis had himself a game late last week to seal the deal for the Saints. But you got to think about, like, Paulson Adebo, Marcus May, Tyrann Mathieu, and somehow, some way, Marshawn Lattimore every now and again. They actually showed up at the right moments last weekend. That could be an opportunity for them to show up at the right moments this weekend if they look to win this game as well.
Yeah, and that Saints team that they defensively through 9 games have only had 3 in which they have allowed more than 20 points defensively. They're
quietly,
pretty impressive metrics. They forced 18 turnovers, which is second in the NFL thus far this season. From a passing game perspective, we're talking about the impact of what Justin Jefferson would do. 5.4 net yards per attempt on opposing quarterbacks passing against the Saints defense is the 5th best mark in the NFL as far as suppressing opposing passing offenses. So if you don't have Justin Jefferson, you really don't like what that math looks like. They're also one of the best defenses on third down. They're 34% on third down defensively against opposing offenses. So they get off the field if they get you into third down at a really high rate. So you need that needle mover. I don't think this is, New Orleans has been had a little bit rushing against when you run the ball against them. I don't think the Vikings really have the running game to do that. So if you are going to win this game, you're going to need big contributions from the passing game. And I don't think that happens unless you do see the return of Justin Jefferson, who's obviously still very much in limbo for this game.
Indeed. We got some really great matchups coming this weekend. You got San Francisco heading to Jacksonville. You got people head scratching saying, how in the world are the 49ers the favorites heading into Jacksonville, a 6-2 team that is really showing themselves to be quite solid. Going to be an interesting matchup, an intriguing matchup with the Lions as well. They're going to head to LA to take on the Rams. Don't know how interesting it is to see the Cowboys and Giants other than, well, I'm always looking to see if somebody can make them the Cowgirls at any given moment. So that's just a personal thing for me. But who you guys, real quick, which games are intriguing matchups for you this weekend?
I got to say the San Francisco 49ers, Deebo Samuel potentially on track to come back and play. Wow. Brock Purdy, what you going to do?
What you going to do? How about you, Kyle?
Yeah, it's that same game for me. And I'm looking at Trent Williams, who doesn't sound particularly promising for his return. I'd pick San Francisco to win the game if Trent plays, but if he doesn't, I'd pick Jacksonville just because I think that defense is really physical. They are also getting a lot of turnovers. They're pretty stout up front, and that 49ers offensive line, it's Trent Williams and a bunch of young guys and guys that have kind of bounced around and haven't been fixtured starters. So they really need Trent to be the glue for that offensive line. And if he's not going to play, I don't like that mix against Jacksonville with heavy-handed guys like Devon Hamilton in the middle and with Trayvon Walker, the defensive end, playing on the edge.
All eyes on Duval this weekend. Thanks so much, guys, for stopping by NFL Kickoff Live. For Kyle Krabs, Travis Davis, I am Tanitra Batiste. Don't forget to come back next week.